Question 1. The efficiency study reveals that the current security posture of the organization's Cisco ACI deployment is not adequately addressing emerging threats. Which of the following approaches to risk assessment would best ensure the identification and mitigation of ACI-specific vulnerabilities and operational risks? Option A. Relying on vendor-provided security advisories as the sole source for identifying potential risks within the ACI environment. Option B. Conducting a broad, high-level security audit using a generic compliance checklist without specific focus on ACI components. Option C. Implementing security controls based on industry best practices for traditional networking environments and assuming they will adequately protect the ACI deployment. Option D. Performing a detailed, documented risk assessment that analyzes potential threats, vulnerabilities, and impacts across the ACI fabric, APIC controllers, EP, and application dependencies, with input from network, security, and application teams. Correct answer is B. Conducting a broad, high-level security audit using a generic compliance checklist without specific focus on ACI components. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a critical need to reassess the risk assessment methodology for the organization's application-centric infrastructure, ASI, deployment. This scenario is professionally challenging because a flawed risk assessment can lead to inadequate security controls, potential data breaches, compliance failures, and significant financial and reputational damage. The organization must ensure its risk assessment process is comprehensive, aligned with industry best practices, and adheres to relevant regulatory frameworks. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process that identifies, analyzes, and evaluates risks specific to the ACI environment. This includes understanding the attack surface, potential vulnerabilities within the ACI fabric, application dependencies, and the impact of potential security incidents. A robust risk assessment should consider both technical and operational risks, and the findings should directly inform the implementation of security policies and controls within ACI. This aligns with the principle of proactive risk management, which is a cornerstone of effective cybersecurity and compliance. For example, understanding the risk of unauthorized access to the ACI APIC controllers would lead to implementing strong authentication and authorization policies, which is a direct outcome of a thorough risk assessment. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on generic security checklists without tailoring them to the unique architecture and operational context of ACI. This fails to identify ACI-specific risks, such as vulnerabilities in the APIC cluster, misconfigurations in endpoint groups (EPG), or insecure inter-EPG communication policies. Such an approach is ethically questionable, as it represents a failure to exercise due diligence in protecting organizational assets and data. Another incorrect approach is to conduct the risk assessment in isolation from the application development and operations teams. ACI's strength lies in its integration of network and application policies. Without input from those who understand the applications and their operational requirements, the risk assessment will likely overlook critical application-level risks and dependencies, leading to ineffective security controls that could disrupt application functionality or fail to protect sensitive data. This is a regulatory failure if it leads to non-compliance with data protection regulations that require understanding and mitigating risks to specific data types. A further incorrect approach is to treat the risk assessment as a one-time activity. The threat landscape and the ACI environment are constantly evolving. Failing to conduct regular reviews and updates of the risk assessment means that emerging threats and new vulnerabilities will not be identified and addressed, leaving the organization exposed. This demonstrates a lack of ongoing commitment to security best practices and can be considered an ethical lapse in maintaining a secure environment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve establishing a clear framework for risk management. This framework should mandate regular risk assessments, define the scope and methodology, ensure cross-functional team involvement, and establish a process for documenting findings and implementing mitigation strategies. Professionals should prioritize understanding the specific technology stack, such as ACI, and its associated risks, rather than applying generic security principles without context. Continuous learning and adaptation to new threats and technologies are also crucial. Question 2. System analysis indicates a need to implement granular microsegmentation policies for a new set of critical applications deployed within an existing Cisco ACI fabric. The primary objectives are to isolate application tiers, enforce least privilege communication, and ensure rapid policy deployment with minimal impact on existing network services. Which of the following approaches best aligns with Cisco ACI's design principles and operational best practices for achieving these objectives? Option A. Define endpoint groups, EPG, for each application tier and establish contracts between EPGs to permit only necessary traffic flows, leveraging ACI's native policy enforcement. Option B. Configure static VLAN and VRFs for each application tier and rely on traditional network access control lists, ACL, applied to switch interfaces. Option C. Implement a host-based firewall solution on each individual server within the application tiers and manage policies independently on each host. Option D. Deploy dedicated physical firewall appliances at the edge of each application subnet and manually configure complex ACLs to control inter-tier communication. The correct answer is A. Define endpoint groups, EPG, for each application tier and establish contracts between EPGs to permit only necessary traffic flows, leveraging ACI's native policy enforcement. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in large-scale data centers where network segmentation and policy enforcement are critical for security and compliance. The challenge lies in selecting the most efficient and secure method for deploying micro-segmentation policies across a diverse set of applications and workloads, while ensuring minimal disruption to ongoing operations and adherence to Cisco ACI best practices. The need for rapid deployment, granular control, and robust policy management makes the choice of implementation strategy paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach leverages the native capabilities of Cisco ACI to define and enforce micro-segmentation policies directly within the fabric. This involves creating EPGs, endpoint groups, that represent logical groupings of endpoints with similar security requirements, and then defining contracts between these EPGs to permit or deny specific traffic flows. The benefits of this approach are manifold. It provides centralized policy management, dynamic policy enforcement that scales with the network, and deep visibility into traffic flows. This aligns with the principles of application-centric networking by tying security policies directly to application tiers and their communication needs, rather than relying on traditional perimeter-based security. This method is considered best professional practice as it maximizes the investment in the ACI infrastructure, simplifies policy administration, and reduces the attack surface by enforcing least privilege access at the application layer. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing micro-segmentation solely through traditional firewall policies at the network edge or by manually configuring access control lists, ACL, on individual network devices is professionally unacceptable for several reasons. Firstly, it fails to utilize the advanced capabilities of the ACI fabric, leading to a fragmented and inefficient security posture. Secondly, it creates significant operational overhead, as policies must be managed and updated across numerous disparate devices, increasing the likelihood of misconfigurations and policy drift. This approach also lacks the dynamic nature of ACI-based microsegmentation, which can automatically adapt to changes in the application environment. Ethically and professionally, relying on outdated methods when a more integrated and secure solution is available represents a failure to uphold the responsibility of providing the most robust and efficient security for the organization's assets. Furthermore, it can lead to compliance violations if the chosen method does not meet the granular control and auditability requirements often mandated by regulatory frameworks, even though specific regulations are not cited here. The principle of due diligence in security implementation remains. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with this decision should first thoroughly understand the capabilities of the deployed ACI fabric and its integrated security features. A deep dive into the ACI policy model, including EPGs, contracts, and the concept of distributed enforcement, is essential. The decision-making process should prioritize solutions that are native to the platform, offer centralized management, and provide dynamic policy updates. Evaluating the operational impact, scalability, and long-term maintainability of each approach is crucial. Professionals should consult Cisco documentation and best practice guides for ACI implementation to ensure alignment with vendor recommendations and industry standards. The goal is to select a strategy that not only meets immediate security requirements, but also supports the evolving needs of the application environment and the organization's overall IT strategy. Question 3. Investigation of a proposed Cisco application-centric infrastructure. ACI implementation reveals that the primary vendor representative has offered a significant personal financial incentive to the lead IT engineer if the project is approved and implemented within an accelerated, vendor-suggested timeline. The engineer is confident in the technical merits of ACI, but is concerned about the vendor's approach and the potential for bias in the decision-making process. Option A. Inform the vendor that the pressure is making the decision process difficult and suggest postponing any further discussions about ACI until a later date, without committing to a specific evaluation plan. Option B. Accept the vendor's incentive and expedite the ACI implementation as requested, prioritizing the vendor's timeline to secure the personal benefit. Option C. Immediately approve the vendor's proposal and initiate the ACI implementation without further review, trusting the vendor's expertise and the offered incentive as a sign of good faith. Option D. Politely decline the personal incentive. Clearly state that all technology decisions will be based on objective technical evaluation and organizational requirements, and proceed with a thorough, independent assessment of the ACI solution's suitability and cost-effectiveness. The correct answer is D. Politely decline the personal incentive. Clearly state that all technology decisions will be based on objective technical evaluation and organizational requirements, and proceed with a thorough, independent assessment of the ACI solution's suitability and cost-effectiveness. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential conflict between a vendor's aggressive sales tactics and the IT professional's responsibility to implement technology based on objective technical merit and organizational needs, rather than undue influence. The core of the challenge lies in maintaining professional integrity and ensuring that technology decisions align with the organization's best interests, free from bias. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes an objective, evidence-based evaluation of the ACI solution. This aligns with ethical principles of professional conduct, which mandate acting in the best interest of the employer and avoiding conflicts of interest. By seeking independent validation and focusing on the technical requirements and business objectives, the IT professional demonstrates due diligence and upholds a commitment to sound engineering principles. This approach ensures that the implementation of Cisco ACI is driven by its suitability for the organization's specific needs and not by external pressures or incentives. An incorrect approach that involves accepting the vendor's offer of a significant personal incentive for a swift implementation is ethically unacceptable. This constitutes a clear conflict of interest, as the IT professional's personal gain is directly tied to a specific vendor choice and implementation timeline, potentially compromising their objectivity. Such an action violates professional codes of conduct that require impartiality and prohibit accepting gifts or incentives that could influence professional judgment. Furthermore, it could lead to the selection of a solution that is not the most technically sound or cost-effective for the organization, potentially resulting in financial loss or operational inefficiencies. Another incorrect approach, which involves immediately approving the vendor's proposal without thorough due diligence, is also professionally unsound. This demonstrates a lack of critical evaluation and a failure to adhere to established procurement and implementation processes. It bypasses the necessary steps to ensure the solution meets the organization's requirements, potentially leading to costly rework, integration issues, or a suboptimal deployment of Cisco ACI. This approach neglects the professional responsibility to thoroughly vet technology solutions before committing organizational resources. A third incorrect approach, which involves delaying the decision indefinitely due to discomfort with the vendor's pressure, while seemingly avoiding direct conflict, is also not ideal. While it avoids accepting the incentive, it fails to address the core issue of objective evaluation and can lead to project stagnation, missed opportunities, or the perception of indecisiveness. A professional approach requires proactive engagement and a structured process for evaluation and decision-making, even when faced with challenging vendor interactions. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Identifying the ethical dilemma and potential conflicts of interest. 2. Consulting organizational policies on vendor interactions, gifts, and procurement. 3. Prioritizing objective technical evaluation based on defined requirements and business needs. 4. Seeking independent validation or second opinions where appropriate. 5. Documenting all evaluations, decisions, and justifications. 6. Communicating transparently with stakeholders about the evaluation process and outcomes. 7. Escalating concerns about vendor conduct or potential conflicts of interest to appropriate management or ethics committees if necessary. Question 4. What factors determine the appropriate level of access and data handling procedures when troubleshooting application performance issues in a Cisco ACI environment that may involve sensitive customer data? Option A. The availability of troubleshooting tools and the administrator's familiarity with Cisco ACI's telemetry capabilities. Option B. The perceived sensitivity of the data being transmitted by the application and the likelihood of encountering PII. Option C. The organization's established data privacy policies, regulatory compliance requirements, and the principle of least privilege. Option D. The urgency of the application performance issue and the potential impact on business operations. Correct answer is D. The urgency of the application performance issue and the potential impact on business operations. Explanation. This scenario presents an ethical dilemma concerning data privacy and security within a Cisco ACI environment. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for troubleshooting with the potential for unauthorized access to sensitive customer data. The network administrator is faced with a situation where a critical application is experiencing performance issues, and the fastest way to diagnose the problem might involve accessing detailed application traffic data, which could contain personally identifiable information, PI, or other confidential data. The correct approach involves adhering strictly to established data access policies and privacy regulations. This means ensuring that any access to sensitive data is logged, authorized, and performed with the minimum necessary privileges. If direct access is required, it should be done in a controlled manner, potentially anonymizing or encrypting data where possible, and always in consultation with security and compliance teams. This aligns with best practices for data protection and regulatory compliance, such as those outlined by the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, if the jurisdiction were the EU, or similar data privacy laws in other regions. The principle of least privilege and the need-to-know basis are paramount. An incorrect approach would be to bypass established security protocols for the sake of expediency. For instance, accessing sensitive customer data without proper authorization or logging, even for troubleshooting, constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could lead to breaches of privacy laws, loss of customer trust, and severe legal and financial repercussions for the organization. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the potential for sensitive data within the traffic, assuming it's not present or not important, which demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for data protection responsibilities. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes compliance and security. This involves 1. Identifying the potential risks, what sensitive data might be exposed, what are the regulatory implications. 2. Consulting policies, reviewing internal data access and privacy policies. 3. Seeking authorization, obtaining necessary approvals before accessing sensitive data. 4. Applying the principle of least privilege, accessing only what is absolutely necessary. 5. Documenting actions, maintaining a clear audit trail of all access and troubleshooting steps. 6. Escalating if unsure, consulting with security, legal, or compliance teams when in doubt. Question 5. When evaluating the implementation of Cisco ACI for network monitoring and troubleshooting, and considering the potential for sensitive customer data to be present in network traffic logs, what is the most ethically sound and regulatory compliant approach to data handling? Option A. Proceed with full logging of all network traffic, as the primary goal is network functionality and troubleshooting, and the risk of data exposure is considered low. Option B. Log all raw network traffic data without modification to ensure complete visibility for troubleshooting purposes, assuming that access controls will prevent unauthorized viewing. Option C. Develop an ad hoc logging strategy based on the immediate troubleshooting needs of the implementation team without a formal policy for data redaction. Option D. Implement robust data anonymization or pseudonymization techniques for any sensitive customer information identified in network traffic logs before analysis or storage. The correct answer is D. Implement robust data anonymization or pseudonymization techniques for any sensitive customer information identified in network traffic logs before analysis or storage. Explanation: the scenario presents an ethical dilemma concerning data privacy and security within the context of implementing Cisco application-centric infrastructure. Aside, the challenge lies in balancing the need for comprehensive network visibility and troubleshooting, which is facilitated by ACI's capabilities, with the imperative to protect sensitive customer data. The regulatory framework for this exam is implicitly US-based, focusing on general principles of data protection and cybersecurity relevant to IT professionals operating within the United States. The correct approach prioritizes data minimization and anonymization, aligning with best practices for data privacy and security. By anonymizing or pseudonymizing sensitive data before it is logged or analyzed, the organization upholds its responsibility to protect customer information, thereby adhering to principles often found in regulations like HIPAA for healthcare data, or general data protection principles applicable to any sensitive information. This approach demonstrates a commitment to ethical data handling and risk mitigation, ensuring that the implementation of ACI does not inadvertently lead to data breaches or privacy violations. An incorrect approach that involves logging all raw traffic data without any form of anonymization or redaction poses significant regulatory and ethical risks. This failure directly contravenes the principle of data minimization, a cornerstone of many data protection regulations. It increases the likelihood of exposing sensitive customer information, leading to potential legal liabilities, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Such an approach demonstrates a disregard for privacy obligations and a lack of due diligence in securing sensitive data. Another incorrect approach, which involves selectively logging only data deemed necessary by the implementation team without a formal policy or justification, is also problematic. This subjective approach lacks transparency and accountability. It opens the door to potential bias and may not adequately cover all sensitive data types. Without a clear, documented policy, it becomes difficult to audit compliance and demonstrate a commitment to data protection, potentially violating regulatory requirements for data handling and security. A further incorrect approach, which is to ignore the potential for sensitive data in logs and proceed with full logging, represents a critical failure in risk assessment and ethical responsibility. This demonstrates a lack of awareness or a deliberate disregard for the potential consequences of mishandling sensitive information. It is a direct violation of the duty of care that professionals owe to their clients and customers, and it exposes the organization to severe legal and financial repercussions. The professional decision-making process in such situations requires a proactive approach to risk management and a strong understanding of ethical obligations. Professionals should: 1. Identify potential sensitive data within the scope of the ACI implementation. 2. Consult relevant data privacy policies and regulations. 3. Implement technical controls like anonymization or pseudonymization to protect sensitive data. 4. Establish clear, documented policies for data logging and access. 5. Conduct regular audits to ensure compliance. 6. Seek legal or compliance counsel when in doubt. Question 6. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing Cisco application-centric infrastructure, ACI, can significantly improve network agility and reduce operational overhead. Given the strict regulatory environment of a US-based financial institution, which approach to ACI deployment best balances process optimization with compliance requirements? Option A. Prioritize the adoption of ACI's most advanced automation features to maximize cost reduction, deferring detailed compliance reviews until after the initial deployment is complete. Option B. Rely solely on the vendor's documentation and sales collateral to configure ACI, assuming that the technology's design inherently meets all financial industry regulatory standards without further internal validation. Option C. Deploy ACI in a phased manner, starting with a pilot program in a non-critical but representative network segment to validate security policies, automation, and operational procedures against existing compliance mandates before a broader rollout. Option D. Implement ACI across the entire data center infrastructure simultaneously to achieve immediate cost savings and operational efficiencies, assuming that ACI's inherent security features will satisfy all regulatory needs. The correct answer is C. Deploy ACI in a phased manner, starting with a pilot program in a non-critical but representative network segment to validate security policies, automation, and operational procedures against existing compliance mandates before a broader rollout. Explanation: scenario analysis. Implementing Cisco application-centric infrastructure, ASI, within a regulated financial services environment presents significant challenges. The primary challenge lies in balancing the drive for process optimization, which often involves adopting new technologies and workflows for efficiency, with the stringent compliance requirements inherent in financial services. Specifically, the need for auditable trails, data integrity, and robust security controls must be meticulously integrated into any optimization strategy. Failure to do so can lead to severe regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. The pressure to demonstrate tangible benefits from technology investments, coupled with the risk of noncompliance, necessitates a highly disciplined and informed decision-making process. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a phased implementation of ACI, focusing initially on a pilot program within a non-critical, yet representative, segment of the network. This strategy aligns with best practices for managing technological change in regulated industries. It allows for thorough validation of ACI's capabilities against specific business and compliance objectives before a full-scale rollout. This includes rigorous testing of security policies, automation workflows, and operational procedures to ensure they meet or exceed existing regulatory standards, such as those mandated by the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, or the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, FINRA, in the U.S. context. The phased approach facilitates continuous monitoring and adjustment, minimizing disruption and ensuring that any optimization efforts do not inadvertently create compliance gaps. This methodical validation is crucial for demonstrating due diligence to auditors and regulators. Correct approach is analysis. Implementing ACI across the entire data center infrastructure simultaneously without prior validation in a pilot environment represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This Big Bang approach dramatically increases the risk of unforeseen issues impacting critical financial operations and data security, potentially violating data integrity and availability regulations. It also makes it exceedingly difficult to isolate and remediate compliance breaches, leading to broader and more severe consequences. Another incorrect approach involves prioritizing cost savings from automation above all else, leading to the adoption of ACI features without a comprehensive review of their impact on existing compliance controls. This can result in the inadvertent weakening of security postures or the creation of unmonitored data flows, directly contravening regulations that mandate robust oversight and protection of sensitive financial data. The ethical failure here is the disregard for the fiduciary responsibility to protect customer assets and data. Finally, adopting ACI solely based on vendor recommendations without independent validation against specific organizational compliance requirements is also a flawed strategy. This approach outsources critical decision-making regarding compliance to a third party, which is ethically questionable and can lead to a failure to meet the unique regulatory obligations of the financial institution. It demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility in ensuring the chosen solution adheres to all applicable laws and guidelines. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with implementing ACI in a regulated environment should adopt a risk-based, phased approach. This involves 1. Thoroughly understanding all applicable regulations and their specific implications for network infrastructure and data handling. 2. Conducting a detailed assessment of current network processes and identifying areas where ACI can genuinely optimize operations without compromising compliance. 3. Designing and executing a pilot program to test ACI's functionality, security, and automation capabilities in a controlled environment. 4. Establishing clear metrics for success that encompass both operational efficiency and compliance adherence. 5. iteratively refining the implementation plan based on pilot results, ensuring that each phase is validated against regulatory requirements before proceeding. 6. Maintaining comprehensive documentation throughout the process to demonstrate due diligence and provide an auditable trail for regulators. Question 7. Operational review demonstrates that the current Cisco ACI fabric configuration, while stable, is not optimally aligned with the latest application deployment patterns and is experiencing increased latency during peak traffic hours. The operations team is tasked with improving efficiency and reducing latency without impacting current service availability. Which of the following approaches best addresses this challenge? Option A. Immediately reconfigure all EPGs and bridge domains across the entire ACI fabric to a new, simplified schema based on a recent industry best practice guide, assuming this will resolve the latency issues. Option B. Implement a phased optimization strategy, starting with a pilot group of applications and fabric nodes, using ACI's built-in monitoring tools to measure latency and resource utilization before and after changes, and iteratively refining configurations based on observed performance data. Option C. Halt all non-essential ACI configuration changes and instruct application teams to optimize their applications to compensate for the fabric's current limitations. Option D. Focus solely on upgrading the physical network hardware within the data center, as this is often the primary cause of latency, and postpone any ACI configuration changes until the hardware refresh is complete. The correct answer is B. Implement a phased optimization strategy, starting with a pilot group of applications and fabric nodes, using ACI's built-in monitoring tools to measure latency and resource utilization before and after changes, and iteratively refining configurations based on observed performance data. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in large-scale network deployments where the initial implementation of a new technology like Cisco ACI may not fully align with evolving operational requirements or best practices. The challenge lies in balancing the need for immediate operational stability with the long-term benefits of process optimization. Without a structured approach, attempts to optimize can lead to unintended consequences, increased complexity, or even service disruptions. The pressure to demonstrate efficiency gains quickly can also lead to rushed decisions that overlook critical dependencies or potential risks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased, data-driven methodology for process optimization within the ACI fabric. This begins with establishing clear, measurable objectives for the optimization effort, directly linked to the operational review's findings. Implementing changes in a controlled, iterative manner, starting with non-production or less critical environments, allows for validation and refinement before wider deployment. Continuous monitoring and feedback loops are crucial to assess the impact of each optimization step and to identify any emergent issues. This approach aligns with best practices for IT service management and change control, ensuring that optimizations enhance, rather than degrade, the stability and performance of the ACI environment. It also supports a proactive stance on risk management, a key tenet in maintaining a secure and reliable infrastructure. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves making broad, sweeping changes across the entire ACI fabric without prior testing or validation. This is a high-risk strategy that can lead to widespread service degradation or outages, directly contravening the principle of maintaining operational continuity. It demonstrates a failure to adhere to standard change management procedures and a disregard for potential cascading failures within the interconnected ACI environment. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize optimization efforts based solely on perceived ease of implementation, rather than their potential impact on key operational metrics or business objectives. This can result in optimizations that offer minimal tangible benefit or even introduce new inefficiencies, wasting resources and failing to address the root causes identified in the operational review. This approach lacks strategic alignment and a data-driven decision-making process. A third incorrect approach is to defer all optimization tasks indefinitely, citing ongoing operational demands. While operational stability is paramount, neglecting optimization leads to technical debt, reduced agility, and an inability to adapt to future requirements. This passive stance can result in a gradual decline in performance and an increased likelihood of significant issues arising later, which are often more costly and disruptive to resolve. It represents a failure to proactively manage the infrastructure and its evolution. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should adopt a structured problem-solving framework. First, thoroughly analyze the operational review findings to identify specific areas for improvement and their potential impact. Second, define clear, measurable objectives for any proposed optimization. Third, develop a phased implementation plan that includes testing, validation, and rollback procedures. Fourth, prioritize changes based on their potential benefit, risk, and alignment with business goals. Finally, establish continuous monitoring and feedback mechanisms to ensure ongoing success and to inform future optimization efforts. This systematic approach ensures that changes are beneficial, controlled, and aligned with the overall health and strategic direction of the ACI deployment. Question 8. The control framework reveals that a critical ACI policy update for a new application service is ready for deployment. The operations team is under significant pressure to bring the service online within the next hour. Which approach best optimizes the process for deploying and validating this policy update while maintaining operational integrity? Option A. Bypass all automated validation checks to expedite the deployment process, relying solely on manual verification of the application service's functionality after the policy is applied. Option B. Implement automated pre-deployment validation checks that verify policy syntax, object dependencies, and adherence to security baselines. Upon successful automated validation, proceed with deployment, followed by automated post-deployment health checks and a brief manual verification of key service functionalities. Option C. Manually review and validate every single configuration element within the ACI policy individually before and after deployment to ensure absolute certainty. Option D. Deploy the policy update immediately and focus only on verifying that the application service is functioning as expected, without explicit checks for policy syntax, security baselines, or operational standards. The correct answer is B. Implement automated pre-deployment validation checks that verify policy syntax, object dependencies, and adherence to security baselines. Upon successful automated validation, proceed with deployment, followed by automated post-deployment health checks and a brief manual verification of key service functionalities. Explanation. The control framework reveals a common challenge in large-scale ACI deployments, optimizing the process of policy deployment and validation to ensure rapid, reliable, and compliant service delivery. This scenario is professionally challenging because the pressure to deliver new services quickly can sometimes lead to shortcuts in validation, potentially introducing misconfigurations or security vulnerabilities that could have significant operational and compliance implications. Careful judgment is required to balance speed with thoroughness. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it establishes a repeatable, automated, and auditable process for policy deployment and validation. This aligns with the principles of good governance and risk management inherent in IT operations. By integrating automated checks and balances, the process minimizes human error, ensures consistency, and provides a clear audit trail, which is crucial for demonstrating compliance with internal policies and any relevant regulatory requirements. Though for this exam, we focus on the technical and process aspects within the ACI framework itself, implying adherence to best practices for secure and efficient network operation. Automation reduces the time to detect and remediate issues, thereby improving overall process efficiency and service availability. An incorrect approach that bypasses automated validation checks before deployment is professionally unacceptable. This represents a significant ethical and operational failure. It directly increases the risk of introducing errors into the production environment, which could lead to service outages, security breaches, or data corruption. Such a shortcut undermines the integrity of the deployment process and demonstrates a disregard for established best practices and the potential impact on business operations. It also makes it difficult to trace the root cause of any subsequent issues, hindering troubleshooting and accountability. Another incorrect approach, which involves manual validation of every single policy element after deployment, is also professionally suboptimal, though less immediately risky than bypassing validation entirely. While thorough, it is inherently inefficient and prone to human error due to the sheer volume and complexity of ACI policies. This approach fails to leverage the automation capabilities of ACI, leading to slower service delivery and increased operational overhead. It represents a failure to optimize the process by not embracing the tools and methodologies designed for efficiency and accuracy in modern network infrastructure. A third incorrect approach, focusing solely on the functional correctness of the deployed policy without considering its security implications or adherence to established operational standards, is also professionally deficient. While functionality is important, a comprehensive validation process must encompass security posture, resource utilization, and alignment with organizational best practices. Neglecting these aspects can lead to vulnerabilities or inefficient resource allocation, which can have long-term negative consequences. This approach demonstrates a narrow focus that overlooks critical aspects of a holistic and secure network deployment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a risk-based assessment. First, clearly define the desired outcomes for policy deployment, including speed, accuracy, security, and compliance. Second, identify and implement automated tools and processes that can achieve these outcomes efficiently. Third, establish clear validation gates at critical points in the deployment lifecycle. Fourth, conduct regular reviews and audits of the deployment process to identify areas for further optimization and ensure continued adherence to best practices. Finally, foster a culture of continuous improvement where team members are encouraged to identify and propose enhancements to existing processes. Question 9. Benchmark analysis indicates that a large enterprise is planning a significant Cisco application-centric infrastructure, a side deployment across its primary data center. The project team is tasked with defining the implementation strategy, balancing the need for rapid deployment with robust security and operational efficiency. Given the diverse stakeholder interests, including application owners, security teams, and IT operations, what is the most prudent approach to implementing the ACI fabric and its associated policies? Option A. Deploy the entire ACI fabric with all advanced features, including comprehensive microsegmentation and complex policy automation, across all data center segments in a single, big bang implementation to achieve immediate full functionality. Option B. Implement a phased rollout, starting with core network functionalities and critical applications, followed by iterative integration of advanced features and broader application support, incorporating continuous validation and stakeholder feedback at each stage. Option C. Prioritize the deployment of the most advanced ACI features, such as sophisticated security policies and automation capabilities, from the outset, deferring the integration of less complex applications and core network services until later phases. Option D. Focus on implementing the most cost-effective ACI configuration, deferring the deployment of advanced security features and comprehensive monitoring tools to a future project to meet initial budget constraints. The correct answer is B. Implement a phased rollout, starting with core network functionalities and critical applications, followed by iterative integration of advanced features and broader application support, incorporating continuous validation and stakeholder feedback at each stage. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in large-scale network deployments where multiple stakeholders with differing priorities must align on a unified strategy. The challenge lies in translating high-level business objectives into concrete technical requirements for Cisco ACI, ensuring that the chosen implementation approach not only meets current needs, but also supports future scalability and agility. The pressure to deliver a functional and efficient network while managing diverse expectations and potential technical debt necessitates a structured and collaborative decision-making process. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a phased implementation strategy that prioritizes core functionalities and business-critical applications first. This aligns with best practices for complex technology rollouts, allowing for iterative validation and refinement. By focusing on a crawl, walk, run methodology, the organization can mitigate risks associated with a big bang deployment, gain early wins, and build confidence among stakeholders. This approach also facilitates better resource allocation and training, ensuring that operational teams are adequately prepared for each phase. From a regulatory and compliance perspective, a phased approach allows for more granular testing and validation of security policies and operational procedures, which is crucial for meeting industry standards and internal governance requirements. This methodical progression ensures that the ACI fabric is deployed in a controlled and auditable manner, minimizing the potential for misconfigurations that could lead to security breaches or service disruptions. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a full-scale, feature-rich ACI fabric across all data center segments simultaneously without prior validation or pilot phases introduces significant risk. This Big Bang approach is prone to unforeseen integration issues, complex troubleshooting, and potential widespread service impact if errors occur. It fails to provide opportunities for learning and adaptation, potentially leading to costly rework and delays. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of due diligence in risk management and stakeholder communication, as it does not adequately account for the potential negative consequences on business operations. Prioritizing the deployment of advanced ACI features like microsegmentation and complex policy automation before establishing a stable foundational fabric and ensuring operational readiness is premature. This can lead to an overly complex initial deployment that is difficult to manage and troubleshoot, negating the intended benefits of ACI. It also risks overwhelming operational teams, leading to errors and potential compliance gaps due to a lack of understanding or proper configuration. This approach is professionally unsound as it prioritizes technical sophistication over operational stability and user adoption, focusing solely on cost reduction by selecting the most basic ACI configuration and deferring essential features like robust security policies and advanced monitoring capabilities is a short-sighted strategy. While cost is a factor, compromising on core functionalities can lead to increased operational costs in the long run due to security incidents, performance issues, and the inability to adapt to evolving business needs. This approach can also create compliance risks if the deferred features are necessary for meeting regulatory mandates or industry best practices, leading to potential fines or reputational damage. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, iterative approach to implementing complex technologies like Cisco ACI. This involves understanding stakeholder requirements, prioritizing functionalities based on business value and risk, and planning for phased deployments. Thorough testing, validation, and continuous feedback loops are essential. Decision-making should be guided by a framework that balances technical feasibility, business objectives, operational readiness, and compliance requirements, ensuring that each step taken is justifiable and contributes to the overall success of the project. Question 10. Market research demonstrates that organizations are increasingly adopting policy-driven network automation to improve agility and reduce operational overhead. A large enterprise is planning to implement Cisco application-centric infrastructure, aside to modernize its data center network. The project team, comprised of network engineers, is eager to leverage ACI's advanced features for rapid deployment and configuration. However, the IT operations team, responsible for day-to-day network management and incident response, has expressed concerns about the steep learning curve and potential disruption to existing workflows. The security team is also cautious, requiring assurance that ACI's security policies will integrate seamlessly with their existing security posture and compliance requirements. Given these stakeholder perspectives, what is the most prudent approach to implementing Cisco ACI? Option A. Implement ACI in a phased manner, but only after the network engineering team has completed all advanced ACI certifications, deferring significant engagement with operations and security until the core infrastructure is established. Option B. Proceed with a full-scale implementation of ACI across the production data center immediately, prioritizing the rapid deployment of advanced features to showcase the technology's capabilities and accelerate time to value. Option C. Initiate a comprehensive pilot program in a non-production environment, involving representatives from network operations and security teams to validate ACI's functionality, operational integration, and security policy enforcement before a full production rollout. Option D. Focus exclusively on configuring ACI with the latest features and functionalities, assuming that the network operations and security teams will adapt to the new system as it becomes operational. The correct answer is C. Initiate a comprehensive pilot program in a non-production environment, involving representatives from network operations and security teams to validate ACI's functionality, operational integration, and security policy enforcement before a full production rollout. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in large-scale network deployments where the implementation of a new, sophisticated technology like Cisco ACI must align with existing operational procedures and stakeholder expectations. The challenge lies in balancing the technical benefits of ACI, such as policy-driven automation and simplified management, with the practical realities of how network operations teams are accustomed to working and the need for clear, auditable processes. The pressure to demonstrate immediate value while ensuring minimal disruption and compliance with internal governance frameworks adds to the complexity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a phased rollout strategy, starting with a pilot program in a non-critical environment. This aligns with best practices for technology adoption and risk management. By engaging key stakeholders, including network operations, security, and application teams, early and often, it ensures buy-in and addresses concerns proactively. The pilot allows for validation of ACI's capabilities against specific business requirements and operational workflows in a controlled setting. This approach demonstrates due diligence, minimizes the risk of widespread disruption, and provides concrete data to justify broader adoption. It also allows for iterative refinement of implementation plans and operational runbooks based on real-world feedback, ensuring that the final deployment is robust, secure, and operationally sound, thereby adhering to principles of responsible technology implementation and change management. Correct approach is analysis, an approach that bypasses initial testing and directly implements ACI across the entire production environment without stakeholder consultation or a pilot program, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It disregards the principle of least privilege and due diligence, potentially leading to widespread service outages, security vulnerabilities, and non-compliance with internal change control policies. Such a hasty implementation could violate internal IT governance frameworks that mandate risk assessment and phased deployments. Another incorrect approach involves focusing solely on the technical configuration of ACI without considering the operational impact or the integration with existing IT service management (ITSM) processes. Failure to integrate ACI into the broader operational ecosystem can lead to a disconnect between the automated infrastructure and the teams responsible for its day-to-day management, potentially causing delays in incident resolution and hindering effective monitoring. Ethically, it fails to equip the operational teams with the necessary knowledge and tools to manage the new environment, creating an unsustainable operational model. Finally, an approach that prioritizes vendor-driven feature adoption over documented business requirements and existing security policies is also professionally unacceptable. This can lead to the implementation of functionalities that are not aligned with the organization's strategic goals or that introduce security risks. It demonstrates a lack of critical evaluation and adherence to established governance, potentially leading to non-compliance with internal security standards and regulatory mandates regarding data protection and system integrity. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with implementing new network infrastructure technologies like ACI should adopt a structured, risk-aware approach. This involves 1. Thoroughly understanding the business and operational requirements. 2. Engaging all relevant stakeholders to gather input and address concerns. 3. Developing a phased implementation plan that includes a pilot or proof of concept in a controlled environment. 4. Establishing clear success criteria for each phase. 5. Documenting all changes and configurations meticulously. 6. Ensuring adequate training and knowledge transfer to operational teams. 7. Continuously monitoring performance and security post-implementation. This methodical process ensures that technology adoption is aligned with organizational objectives, minimizes risk, and maintains compliance with internal policies and external regulations. Question 11. Process analysis reveals that a critical business application deployment is behind schedule, and the network engineering team is under pressure to expedite the Cisco ACI configuration. A senior engineer suggests bypassing the formal security policy review for the new EPGs and contracts, stating that the proposed configuration is standard and will likely pass muster later. The project manager is eager to approve this shortcut to meet the deadline. What is the most professional and compliant course of action? Option A. Insist on a formal security policy review and validation of the EPGs and contracts against established compliance requirements before deployment, even if it causes a minor delay. Option B. Proceed with the deployment based on the senior engineer's verbal assurance and schedule a post-deployment review to address any potential policy deviations. Option C. Deploy the configuration as proposed by the senior engineer, with the understanding that the project manager will take responsibility for any subsequent policy noncompliance. Option D. Implement the configuration using the vendor's default settings for the new EPGs and contracts, assuming they meet general security standards. Correct answer is A. Insist on a formal security policy review and validation of the EPGs and contracts against established compliance requirements before deployment, even if it causes a minor delay. Explanation. Scenario analysis. The scenario presents a common challenge in network infrastructure implementation, balancing the need for rapid deployment with the imperative of adhering to established security policies and compliance requirements. The pressure to deliver a functional network quickly can lead to shortcuts that, while seemingly expedient, introduce significant risks. In the context of Cisco ACI and its focus on policy-driven automation, deviating from the defined policy model can undermine the very benefits ACI aims to provide, such as consistent security posture and simplified management. The professional challenge lies in resisting immediate pressure for expediency and instead advocating for a structured, compliant approach, even if it means a slight delay. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review and validation of the proposed configuration against the established security policies and compliance frameworks. This aligns with best practices for secure network deployments and regulatory adherence. In the context of DCACI, this means ensuring that the application network profiles AMP, endpoint groups EP, and contracts are correctly defined and implemented according to the organization's security posture and any relevant industry regulations, e.g., PCI DSS HIPAA, if applicable within the exam's jurisdiction. This approach ensures that the deployed infrastructure is not only functional but also secure, auditable, and compliant, thereby mitigating risks of breaches, data loss, and regulatory penalties. It upholds the principle of least privilege and defense in depth, fundamental to secure network design. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing the configuration without a formal review, despite the urgency, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It bypasses critical security checks, potentially introducing vulnerabilities that could lead to data breaches or noncompliance with industry standards. This shortcut directly contravenes the principles of due diligence and responsible network management. Deploying the configuration with a verbal assurance from a senior engineer without documented validation is also professionally unacceptable. While trust is important, it does not replace the need for auditable processes and documented compliance. This approach lacks the rigor required for security-sensitive environments and leaves the organization exposed if an issue arises. It fails to establish a clear audit trail and accountability. Relying solely on the vendor's default configurations without customization or validation against organizational policies is another critical failure. Default configurations are often designed for broad compatibility and may not meet specific security requirements or compliance mandates. This approach abdicates responsibility for security and compliance to the vendor, which is not a permissible strategy in regulated environments. It demonstrates a lack of understanding of the organization's unique risk profile and regulatory obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should employ a structured decision-making framework that prioritizes risk management and compliance. This involves 1. Understanding the requirements, clearly define the technical and business needs, alongside all applicable security policies and regulatory mandates. 2. Assessing the risks, evaluate the potential consequences of deviating from established procedures or policies. 3. Consulting the framework, refer to the organization's documented security policies, compliance guidelines, and the Cisco ACI best practices. 4. Communicating effectively, clearly articulate the risks associated with shortcuts to stakeholders, advocating for the compliant approach. 5. Documenting decisions. Ensure all decisions, especially those involving deviations or risk acceptance, are thoroughly documented and approved by appropriate authorities. 6. Seeking expert advice. When in doubt, consult with security architects, compliance officers, or legal counsel. Question 12. The evaluation methodology shows that a network engineer is tasked with implementing a new set of security policies within a Cisco ACI fabric to segment sensitive application tiers. The engineer has configured the EPGs, contracts, and associated security groups. What is the most professional and compliant approach to ensure these policies are effectively enforced before the applications become active? Option A. Utilize the ACI's built-in policy verification tools and perform targeted traffic tests simulating expected application flows to confirm contract enforcement and EPG isolation. Option B. Deploy the policies and rely on the application owners to report any connectivity or security issues they encounter. Option C. Apply the policies and then proceed with configuring other network services, deferring any specific policy validation until a later maintenance window. Option D. Immediately activate the applications and monitor network traffic for any anomalies, assuming the configuration is correct based on the design document. The correct answer is A. Utilize the ACI's built-in policy verification tools and perform targeted traffic tests simulating expected application flows to confirm contract enforcement and EPG isolation. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that implementing Cisco application-centric infrastructure, ACI, requires a thorough understanding of its operational and security implications. A common challenge in ACI deployments is ensuring that network policies, particularly those related to security and segmentation, are correctly applied and maintained across the fabric. This scenario is professionally challenging because misconfigurations can lead to security breaches, service disruptions, and compliance violations. The pressure to deploy quickly can sometimes lead to overlooking critical validation steps. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and verifiable method for policy deployment and validation. By leveraging ACI's built-in tools and adhering to a structured testing process, network engineers can confirm that security groups, contracts, and endpoint groups, EPGA, are functioning as intended, thereby meeting the security and operational requirements. This aligns with the principle of due diligence in network management and security. An incorrect approach that involves deploying policies without comprehensive validation poses significant regulatory and ethical risks. Specifically, it violates the principle of responsible system implementation, which mandates that systems be thoroughly tested before going live. This failure can lead to breaches of data privacy regulations, if applicable to the jurisdiction, and a breach of trust with stakeholders who rely on the integrity and security of the network. Another incorrect approach, relying solely on vendor defaults without customization and verification, fails to address the unique security posture and compliance needs of the organization, potentially leaving critical vulnerabilities unaddressed and violating the duty of care to protect organizational assets. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that emphasizes a phased approach: design, implementation, validation, and ongoing monitoring. This framework requires a commitment to thorough testing at each stage, utilizing available tools and documentation to confirm that the implemented solution meets all functional, security, and compliance requirements. When faced with time constraints, the framework dictates that validation steps should be streamlined but not eliminated, perhaps by prioritizing critical security policies for immediate testing and scheduling less critical ones for subsequent validation. Question 13. The assessment process reveals that a new critical business application is being deployed within the ACI fabric. The application team has provided a high-level overview of its functionality, but has not detailed specific communication flows or security requirements beyond general statements about data sensitivity. The network engineering team is tasked with implementing the ACI policies to govern this application's network access. Which of the following approaches best represents a professional and compliant method for implementing these policies? Option A. Apply a default security policy that is commonly used for other applications within the data center, assuming similar requirements. Option B. Implement a broad, permissive policy that allows all inbound and outbound traffic for the application's EPG, and then refine it later if issues arise. Option C. Configure basic network connectivity for the application's EPG and rely on existing perimeter security controls to manage its security posture. Option D. Engage with the application team to obtain detailed specifications of required communication flows, security zones, and data handling requirements, and then design granular ACI policies based on this information. The correct answer is B. Implement a broad, permissive policy that allows all inbound and outbound traffic for the application's EPG, and then refine it later if issues arise. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in network virtualization, ensuring consistent policy enforcement across diverse application deployments. This scenario is professionally challenging because a failure to accurately map application requirements to ACI policies can lead to security vulnerabilities, performance degradation, and compliance issues. The complexity arises from the dynamic nature of applications and the need for granular control within the APIC environment. Careful judgment is required to translate abstract application needs into concrete, enforceable network policies. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding of the application's communication patterns and security posture before configuring ACI policies. This aligns with the principle of least privilege and defense in depth, ensuring that only necessary communication paths are allowed and that security controls are applied appropriately. By leveraging ACI's object-oriented model and policy constructs, such as EPGs, contracts, and filters, network engineers can create a robust and auditable security framework that directly supports application requirements and meets regulatory compliance mandates. This proactive and detailed approach minimizes the risk of misconfiguration and ensures that the network infrastructure effectively supports the application's lifecycle. An incorrect approach that involves a superficial understanding of application needs and a broad, permissive policy configuration is professionally unacceptable. This failure to perform due diligence directly violates security best practices and can lead to significant regulatory or ethical breaches. For instance, if an application requires specific inbound and outbound traffic flows for its operation, and a broad policy is applied that allows all traffic, it creates an unnecessary attack surface. This lack of granular control could lead to unauthorized access, data exfiltration, or denial of service attacks, all of which could result in severe compliance violations and reputational damage. Furthermore, a failure to document the rationale behind policy decisions or to map policies back to application requirements hinders auditing and troubleshooting, making it difficult to demonstrate compliance or identify the root cause of network issues. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on network connectivity without considering application-specific security requirements, is also professionally unsound. This overlooks the critical aspect of application security, which is paramount in modern IT environments. Relying on perimeter security alone is insufficient when applications themselves have unique security needs. Failing to implement application-aware security controls within the ACI fabric can leave critical business functions exposed to threats that bypass traditional network defenses. This can lead to breaches that impact data integrity, confidentiality, and availability, resulting in significant financial and legal repercussions. The professional reasoning framework for such situations involves a structured, iterative process. First, engage with application owners and stakeholders to gain a comprehensive understanding of the application's functional and security requirements. Second, translate these requirements into ACI policy constructs, starting with the most restrictive configuration and progressively allowing necessary traffic. Third, thoroughly test and validate the implemented policies to ensure they meet both functional and security objectives. Fourth, document all policy configurations, including the rationale and mapping to application requirements, for auditability and future reference. Finally, establish a continuous monitoring and review process to adapt policies as application requirements evolve. Question 14. The performance metrics show a significant increase in application latency for a critical financial trading application deployed within the Cisco ACI fabric. Initial observations suggest potential network-related issues, but the exact cause within the ACI environment is unclear. Which of the following approaches would be the most effective for diagnosing the root cause of this performance degradation? Option A. Reviewing ACI endpoint group, EPG policies and contracts to ensure they are correctly configured and not inadvertently throttling or blocking traffic to the application servers. Option B. Analyzing general network traffic patterns across the entire data center network, looking for widespread congestion unrelated to specific application flows. Option C. Focusing exclusively on application-level logs and debugging output to pinpoint errors within the application code itself. Option D. Immediately initiating a full hardware diagnostic sweep, of all ACI leaf and spine switches to identify any potential hardware malfunctions. Correct answer is A. Reviewing ACI endpoint group (EP) policies and contracts to ensure they are correctly configured and not inadvertently throttling or blocking traffic to the application servers. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the critical nature of application performance in a Cisco ACI environment. The challenge lies in accurately attributing performance degradation to specific network configurations or application behaviors, especially when multiple factors could be at play. A thorough impact assessment is crucial to avoid misdiagnosis, which could lead to incorrect remediation efforts, prolonged downtime, and potential financial or reputational damage for the organization. The need for a structured and evidence-based approach is paramount to ensure compliance with operational best practices and service-level agreements, SLAs. The correct approach involves a systematic analysis of the ACI fabric's health, application network profiles (AMP), endpoint groups (EP), and contracts, correlating these with the observed performance metrics. This method ensures that the assessment is grounded in the ACI's operational model and the specific application's traffic flow. By examining the ACI configuration in conjunction with the performance data, one can isolate potential network-related bottlenecks or misconfigurations. This aligns with professional best practices for network troubleshooting and performance management, emphasizing data-driven decision-making and a deep understanding of the underlying technology. An incorrect approach would be to immediately assume a hardware failure or a broad network issue without first investigating the ACI-specific configurations. This bypasses the detailed analysis required by the ACI architecture. For instance, attributing the issue solely to a general network congestion problem without examining ACI contracts or EPG policies fails to acknowledge the granular control ACI provides over application traffic. This could lead to unnecessary hardware replacements or broad network changes that do not address the root cause, violating the principle of efficient resource utilization and potentially impacting other applications. Another incorrect approach would be to focus solely on application logs without considering how ACI policies might be shaping or restricting the application's network communication. This overlooks the potential for ACI misconfigurations to directly impede application performance, a critical failure in understanding the integrated nature of ACI. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with defining the scope of the problem, gathering all relevant data, performance metrics, ACI configuration, application logs, and then systematically analyzing this data. This involves forming hypotheses about potential causes, testing these hypotheses against the evidence, and iteratively refining the assessment. The process should prioritize ACI-specific investigations before escalating to broader network or application-level troubleshooting, ensuring that the most probable causes within the ACI domain are ruled out or confirmed first. Question 15. Strategic planning requires a thorough evaluation of potential consequences before implementing significant network infrastructure changes. When considering the adoption of Cisco application-centric infrastructure, ACI, which of the following approaches to assessing the impact of this transition best aligns with professional best practices and minimizes operational disruption? Option A. Forming an impact assessment solely based on vendor documentation and pre-built ACI templates, assuming that these resources adequately represent the unique requirements and complexities of the existing application environment. Option B. Engaging a broad range of stakeholders, including network operations, application development, security teams, and business unit representatives, to collaboratively identify and analyze the technical, operational, and business impacts of the ACI migration and developing a comprehensive mitigation and validation plan. Option C. Prioritizing the rapid deployment of the ACI solution to gain early operational experience, with the understanding that any unforeseen issues can be addressed reactively as they arise during the initial operational period. Option D. Conducting a detailed technical assessment of the ACI fabric's capabilities and limitations, focusing on hardware compatibility and initial configuration steps, while deferring operational and application-specific impact analysis to the post-implementation phase. The correct answer is D. Conducting a detailed technical assessment of the ACI fabric's capabilities and limitations, focusing on hardware compatibility and initial configuration steps, while deferring operational and application-specific impact analysis to the post-implementation phase. Explanation: strategic planning in the context of implementing Cisco application-centric infrastructure, ASI, requires a thorough impact assessment to understand how proposed changes will affect existing network operations, application performance, and security posture. The challenge lies in anticipating unintended consequences and ensuring alignment with business objectives and regulatory compliance. A robust impact assessment helps identify potential risks, resource needs, and necessary mitigation strategies before deployment, thereby minimizing disruption and maximizing the benefits of ACI. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, multifaceted assessment that considers technical, operational, and business impacts. This includes evaluating how ACI's policy-driven model will alter current network management practices, how application dependencies will be represented and enforced within the ACI fabric, and how security policies will be translated and applied. It also necessitates engaging stakeholders across IT operations, application development, and security teams to gather diverse perspectives and ensure all critical areas are covered. This holistic view is crucial for successful ACI adoption and adherence to best practices in network modernization. An incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the technical migration of network devices to ACI without considering the operational and application-level implications. This oversight can lead to unexpected application outages, performance degradation, and increased operational overhead as teams struggle to adapt to the new paradigm. It fails to address the fundamental shift in network management from device-centric to application-centric. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize speed of deployment over thoroughness of the impact assessment. Rushing through the assessment phase, driven by perceived time constraints, increases the likelihood of overlooking critical dependencies, security vulnerabilities, or integration challenges. This can result in costly rework, extended downtime, and reputational damage, directly contravening the principles of responsible IT implementation. A third incorrect approach is to conduct the impact assessment in isolation, without involving key stakeholders from application development, security, and business units. This siloed approach leads to incomplete understanding of application requirements, security mandates, and business criticality, resulting in an ACI implementation that does not adequately support business needs or meet compliance obligations. The professional decision-making process for such situations should involve a structured, phased approach to impact assessment. This begins with defining the scope and objectives of the ACI implementation. Subsequently, a detailed analysis of the current network and application landscape should be performed, identifying all dependencies and critical components. Stakeholder engagement is paramount throughout this process, ensuring that all relevant parties contribute their expertise and concerns. Finally, the findings of the impact assessment should be documented, leading to a clear plan for mitigation, remediation, and phased deployment, with continuous monitoring and validation. Question 16. The audit findings indicate that a specific EPG endpoint group appears to be communicating with another EPG across a VRF, virtual routing, and forwarding boundary in a manner that contradicts the defined contract and security policies within the Cisco ACI fabric. The audit team suspects a misconfiguration in the contract or the EPG association. Which of the following actions is the most appropriate and compliant approach to investigate and rectify this situation within the Cisco ACI framework? Option A. Rebuild the entire VRF and all associated EPGs and contracts from scratch to ensure a clean configuration. Option B. Directly access the leaf switches involved and manually adjust the access control lists, ACL, and VLAN configurations to enforce the desired segmentation. Option C. Examine the ACI fabric's APIC, Application Policy Infrastructure Controller, logs and policy configuration for the involved EPGs, VRF, and the associated contract to identify any discrepancies between the intended policy and the actual implementation. Option D. Restart the relevant services on the APIC cluster to clear any potential caching issues that might be causing the incorrect policy enforcement. The correct answer is C. Examine the ACI fabric's APIC, Application Policy Infrastructure Controller, logs and policy configuration for the involved EPGs, VRF, and the associated contract to identify any discrepancies between the intended policy and the actual implementation. Explanation: the audit findings indicate a potential misconfiguration within the Cisco application Centric infrastructure, a SI fabric that could lead to unauthorized network segmentation bypass. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts the security posture and compliance of the organization's data center network. The ability to enforce granular network policies is a core tenet of ACI, and any deviation can have significant security and operational implications. Careful judgment is required to identify the root cause and implement the correct remediation without introducing further instability or security risks. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it involves a systematic and policy-driven method for addressing the identified vulnerability. By leveraging ACI's built-in policy enforcement mechanisms and adhering to established change management procedures, the network administrator ensures that any modifications are documented, tested, and aligned with the intended security posture. This aligns with the principles of secure network design and operational excellence, which are implicitly expected within the context of implementing and managing enterprise-grade network solutions like ACI. The focus on understanding the intent of the policy and verifying its implementation through ACI's object model is crucial for maintaining the integrity of the fabric. An incorrect approach that involves directly manipulating low-level switch configurations without understanding the ACI policy context is professionally unacceptable. This bypasses the ACI controller's management plane, leading to configuration drift and making the fabric difficult to manage and troubleshoot. It violates the fundamental principle of ACI, which is centralized policy management. Such actions can lead to security vulnerabilities by inadvertently creating unintended network paths or weakening existing security controls, potentially violating internal security policies and industry best practices for secure network operations. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on a superficial fix, such as restarting a service without diagnosing the underlying policy misconfiguration, is also professionally unsound. While it might temporarily resolve an observable symptom, it fails to address the root cause. This can lead to recurring issues and a lack of confidence in the network's stability. From a compliance perspective, failing to address the root cause of a security or policy violation means the underlying risk remains, which could be a failure to meet audit requirements or internal control objectives. A professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Understand the reported issue and its potential impact. 2. Consult ACI documentation and best practices related to the specific area of concern. 3. Utilize ACI's operational tools and interfaces to gather detailed information about the fabric's state and policy configuration. 4. Formulate hypotheses about the root cause, focusing on policy intent versus actual implementation. 5. Develop a remediation plan that prioritizes policy-driven changes within the ACI framework. 6. Implement changes following a defined change management process, including testing and rollback procedures. 7. Verify the resolution and document the findings and actions taken. Question 17. The control framework reveals that a financial services organization is implementing a new microservices-based trading platform within their Cisco ACI data center. The platform consists of distinct tiers: a web frontend, an application logic layer, and a database layer. Compliance requirements mandate strict isolation of sensitive customer data and adherence to the principle of least privilege for all intercomponent communication. The current ACI configuration has established separate EPGs for each tier, but lacks explicit inter-EPG communication policies. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the organization's security and compliance obligations for this trading platform within the ACI fabric? Option A. Create a new, highly granular EPG for every individual microservice instance and rely on VRF isolation to segment the entire trading platform from other network segments. Option B. Implement Cisco ACI contracts that explicitly permit only the necessary communication flows between the web frontend EPG, the application logic EPG, and the database EPG, adhering to the principle of least privilege. Option C. Remove the existing EPGs and rely solely on traditional firewall rules placed at the edge of the ACI fabric to control traffic between the trading platform tiers. Option D. Configure the ACI fabric to allow all inter-EPG communication by default within the relevant VRF, assuming that the EPGs themselves provide sufficient segmentation. The correct answer is B. Implement Cisco ACI contracts that explicitly permit only the necessary communication flows between the web front-end EPG, the application logic EPG, and the database EPG, adhering to the principle of least privilege. Explanation. The control framework reveals a critical juncture in network segmentation strategy within a Cisco ACI environment. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for robust security and compliance with the operational demands of application agility and inter-application communication. Misinterpreting or misapplying the principles of microsegmentation, particularly in relation to EPGs and contracts, can lead to significant security vulnerabilities, compliance breaches, and operational disruptions. The regulatory framework for this exam, focusing on U.S. regulations, mandates adherence to principles of least privilege and data protection, often codified in standards like NIST SB 800-53. Correct approach, leveraging EPGs to define application tiers and contracts to explicitly permit only necessary communication, represents best professional practice. This aligns directly with the NIST framework's emphasis on access control, AC, and system and communications protection, SC families, ensuring that only authorized entities can communicate and that communication channels are protected. By granularly defining communication paths, it minimizes the attack surface and adheres to the principle of least privilege, a cornerstone of U.S. cybersecurity regulations. An incorrect approach that broadly permits all inter-EPG communication without explicit contracts fails to implement the principle of least privilege. This creates a flat network within the ACI fabric, rendering microsegmentation ineffective and exposing sensitive data to unauthorized access, a direct violation of data protection mandates. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on VRF isolation without EPGs and contracts overlooks the need for intra-VRF segmentation. While VRFs provide network isolation, they do not inherently control application-level communication within that isolated network, leaving potential lateral movement for threats. A third incorrect approach that oversegments by creating an EPG for every single application component, without considering logical grouping and communication patterns, leads to unmanageable complexity and operational overhead, potentially hindering legitimate application functionality and increasing the risk of misconfiguration, indirectly impacting compliance by making oversight difficult. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding the application's communication requirements and data sensitivity. This involves a thorough risk assessment, mapping application tiers to EPGs, and then meticulously defining contracts based on the principle of least privilege. Regular auditing of EPG and contract configuration against security policies and compliance requirements is also crucial. Question 18. Governance review demonstrates that a multi-tier application deployed within the Cisco ACI fabric is experiencing communication issues between its web and application tiers, despite initial configuration suggesting connectivity. The current configuration places the web tier and application tier within separate endpoint groups EP, but utilizes a single virtual routing and forwarding instance, VRF, for both. The network administrator proposes resolving the issue by creating a broad contract that permits all TCP and UDP traffic between the web and application EPGs. What is the most appropriate and secure approach to address this situation within the ACI framework? Option A. Implement external firewall rules on the leaf switches to permit all traffic between the web and application EPGs. Option B. Create a broad contract that allows all TCP and UDP traffic between the web and application EPGs, as proposed by the administrator. Option C. Remove the EPG separation and place both the web and application tiers into a single EPG to simplify communication management. Option D. Define a new VRF for the application tier and create a specific contract that allows only the necessary protocols and ports for web-to-application communication. The correct answer is D. Define a new VRF for the application tier and create a specific contract that allows only the necessary protocols and ports for web-to-application communication. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in network segmentation and policy enforcement within an application-centric infrastructure, ASI, environment. The challenge lies in balancing the need for granular security and isolation with the operational requirements of application communication. Misinterpreting or misapplying ACI's policy model can lead to security vulnerabilities, compliance failures, and service disruptions. The pressure to quickly implement changes without a thorough understanding of the implications of different ACI constructs, such as EPGs, contracts, and VRFs, makes careful judgment paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging ACI's native constructs to achieve the desired segmentation and communication policies, specifically defining separate endpoint groups EP for distinct application tiers e.g. Web Application Database is fundamental. These EPGs should then be placed within appropriate virtual routing and forwarding instances, VRF, to enforce network isolation. Crucially, communication between these EPGs is controlled by contracts, which specify the allowed protocols, ports, and direction of traffic. This method aligns with ACI's policy-driven automation, ensuring that security and network policies are consistently applied and enforced across the fabric. This approach directly addresses the requirement for isolation, while enabling controlled communication, adhering to best practices for secure and efficient network design within ACI. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to rely solely on traditional firewall rules outside of the ACI fabric to control inter-EPG communication. This bypasses ACI's integrated policy enforcement, leading to a fragmented security posture and increased operational complexity. It fails to leverage the benefits of ACI's automation and centralized policy management, potentially creating policy inconsistencies and making troubleshooting more difficult. Ethically, this approach represents a failure to utilize the capabilities of the deployed technology effectively, potentially exposing the organization to risks that ACI is designed to mitigate. Another incorrect approach would be to place all application components within a single EPG and attempt to manage communication through external access control lists, ACL, on the leaf switches. This completely negates the purpose of EPGs for segmentation and policy enforcement within ACI. It creates a flat network within the ACI fabric for these components, making it impossible to apply granular policies based on application tiers or roles. This approach is a significant regulatory and ethical failure, as it fundamentally undermines the security architecture and introduces substantial risks of unauthorized access and data breaches. A third incorrect approach would be to create overly broad contracts that permit all traffic between EPGs. While this might satisfy immediate application connectivity needs, it fails to implement the principle of least privilege and creates unnecessary attack vectors. This approach is professionally unacceptable as it prioritizes convenience over security, directly contradicting the goals of network segmentation and policy enforcement. It represents a failure to conduct a thorough risk assessment and implement appropriate security controls, potentially leading to compliance violations and security incidents. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach ACI policy design by first understanding the application's communication requirements and then mapping these requirements to ACI constructs. This involves identifying distinct application tiers, defining their respective EPGs, and determining the necessary VRF isolation. Subsequently, contracts should be meticulously crafted to permit only the essential traffic flows between EPGs, adhering to the principle of least privilege. This systematic, policy-driven approach ensures that security, compliance, and operational efficiency are integrated into the ACI fabric from the outset. Regular reviews of EPG definitions, VRF assignments, and contract configurations are essential to maintain the integrity and effectiveness of the ACI policy model. Question 19. Assessment of how a Cisco ACI implementation plan should be validated against the specific data protection and privacy regulations applicable to the organization's operational jurisdiction to ensure compliance. Option A. The ACI implementation plan should be prioritized based on its ability to achieve the highest network throughput and lowest latency, with regulatory compliance being a secondary consideration addressed post-deployment. Option B. The ACI implementation plan should be considered complete once the core network functionality is established, with a separate, later phase dedicated to assessing and rectifying any potential regulatory compliance gaps. Option C. The ACI implementation plan should be reviewed to ensure that its policy constructs, such as endpoint groups, EP, and contracts, directly support and enforce the data segregation and access control requirements mandated by the relevant data protection and privacy regulations. Option D. The ACI implementation plan should be developed with a focus on leveraging the latest ACI features for network agility, assuming that regulatory compliance will be implicitly met by adopting modern infrastructure. The correct answer is C. The ACI implementation plan should be reviewed to ensure that its policy constructs, such as endpoint groups, EP, and contracts, directly support and enforce the data segregation and access control requirements mandated by the relevant data protection and privacy regulations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in a regulated environment where the implementation of network infrastructure directly impacts compliance and operational integrity. The core difficulty lies in balancing the technical requirements of Cisco ACI with the stringent regulatory mandates governing data handling and security. Misinterpreting or overlooking these regulations can lead to significant compliance breaches, financial penalties, and reputational damage. The need for a deep understanding of both the technology and the applicable regulatory framework is paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the Cisco ACI implementation plan against the specific requirements of the relevant regulatory framework. This means ensuring that the chosen ACI policies, segmentation strategies, e.g., using EPGs and VRFs, and access controls directly map to and satisfy the compliance obligations. For instance, if the regulation mandates data segregation for sensitive information, the ACI design must demonstrably achieve this through policy enforcement. This approach represents best professional practice because it proactively integrates compliance into the design and implementation phases, minimizing the risk of post-deployment remediation and ensuring that the infrastructure is built with regulatory adherence as a foundational element. It aligns with the principle of compliance by design. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing ACI without a clear mapping to regulatory requirements is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This approach assumes that technical functionality alone is sufficient, ignoring the legal and operational obligations. It creates a high risk of noncompliance, as the implemented controls may not meet the specific standards set by the regulatory body. Focusing solely on achieving desired network performance metrics without considering regulatory implications is another failure. While performance is important, it cannot supersede legal mandates. This approach prioritizes technical optimization over compliance, potentially leading to the deployment of a system that is technically sound but legally deficient. This can result in severe penalties and the requirement for costly rework. Adopting a wait-and-see approach, where compliance is addressed only after the ACI fabric is operational, is a reactive and fundamentally flawed strategy. This is a direct abdication of professional responsibility to ensure regulatory adherence from the outset. It significantly increases the likelihood of discovering compliance gaps late in the project, leading to project delays, budget overruns, and potential legal repercussions. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and foresight. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a proactive and integrated approach to compliance. This involves 1. Identifying all applicable regulatory frameworks relevant to the data being handled and the operational environment. 2. Thoroughly understanding the specific requirements of these regulations as they pertain to network infrastructure and data security. 3. Translating these regulatory requirements into concrete ACI design principles and policy configurations. 4. Documenting the mapping between ACI configurations and regulatory controls to provide auditable evidence of compliance. 5. Regularly reviewing and updating the ACI implementation and compliance posture as regulations evolve or business needs change. This systematic process ensures that technical solutions are not only functional, but also legally sound and ethically responsible. Question 20. Comparative studies suggest that when implementing Cisco application-centric infrastructure, ACI, for tenant traffic segmentation and policy enforcement, different architectural approaches can be employed. Considering the need for granular control and adherence to application-centric principles, which of the following approaches best aligns with the intended operational and security benefits of ACI? Option A. Implementing granular security policies by defining endpoint groups, EP, that logically group endpoints with similar security and communication requirements, and then establishing specific contracts that dictate the allowed communication between these EPGs. Option B. Creating an extremely large number of highly specific endpoint groups, EP, to represent every minor variation in application communication, leading to significant administrative overhead and complexity. Option C. Implementing broad security policies that permit extensive communication between most endpoint groups, EP, to simplify management, even if it means less granular control over application traffic flows. Option D. Relying primarily on traditional VLAN-based segmentation within the ACI fabric to isolate tenant traffic, without significant utilization of ACI's EPG and contract constructs for inter-EPG communication control. The correct answer is A. Implementing granular security policies by defining endpoint groups, EP, that logically group endpoints with similar security and communication requirements, and then establishing specific contracts that dictate the allowed communication between these EPGs. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in modern data center networking, balancing the need for granular application policy enforcement with the operational complexity of managing a large-scale Cisco application-centric infrastructure, a SI fabric. The professional challenge lies in selecting the most effective and compliant method for segmenting tenant traffic, ensuring security, and maintaining network performance without introducing undue administrative overhead or violating the principles of ACI's policy-driven model. Careful judgment is required to align technical implementation with the intended benefits of ACI and to avoid common pitfalls that can lead to security vulnerabilities or operational inefficiencies. The correct approach leverages ACI's native constructs for policy enforcement and segmentation, specifically the use of EPGs, endpoint groups, and contracts. This method represents best professional practice because it directly aligns with the core design principles of ACI, which is to abstract network infrastructure and enforce policies at the application layer. EPGs logically group endpoints with similar policy requirements, and contracts define the communication rules between these groups. This granular control allows for precise security policies, micro-segmentation, and compliance with potential regulatory requirements. Though specific regulations are not mandated for this question, the principle of controlled communication is universally applicable. This approach is efficient, scalable, and auditable, making it the most robust solution for managing application traffic within an ACI fabric. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on traditional VLAN-based segmentation within the ACI fabric without utilizing EPGs and contracts. This fails to leverage the full capabilities of ACI and introduces significant regulatory and ethical failures. From a regulatory perspective, it bypasses the application-centric policy enforcement that ACI is designed to provide, potentially leading to non-compliance with security mandates that require explicit communication policies. Ethically, it represents a failure to implement the technology as intended, leading to a less secure and less manageable environment, which could have downstream consequences for data protection and system integrity. Another incorrect approach would be to implement overly broad security policies that allow excessive communication between EPGs, even if EPGs are used. While using EPGs is a step in the right direction, a lack of granular contracts would create a security posture that is effectively similar to a flat network. This would be a regulatory failure as it would not meet the requirements for least privilege access and would expose applications to unnecessary risks. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of diligence in securing the application environment. A third incorrect approach would be to create an excessive number of highly granular EPGs for minor variations in application behavior, leading to unmanageable complexity. While granular segmentation is good, over-segmentation can lead to a configuration nightmare, making it difficult to troubleshoot, update, and audit policies. This could indirectly lead to regulatory issues if policies become too complex to manage and maintain, increasing the risk of misconfigurations or security gaps. Ethically, it represents poor design and planning, leading to an unsustainable operational model. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the application's communication requirements, the security posture needed, and the capabilities of the ACI fabric. The primary goal should be to implement policies that are both effective and manageable. This involves 1. Identifying logical groupings of endpoints based on their application roles and security needs. 2. Defining explicit communication rules, contracts between these groups, adhering to the principle of least privilege. 3. Regularly reviewing and auditing policies to ensure they remain relevant and effective. 4. Balancing granularity with operational manageability to avoid creating an overly complex environment.